虽然主来的日子只能靠时间来检验它的真假，但是因为我们现在有圣经的预言，有一些科学的数据和天文学啊、地理一些报告，还有人的很多的证词，所以我们现在有理由学习，并且保持警醒，主来的日子是不是近了。最近呢，我有一个学习是关于小行星的一个预言。这个小行星其实我早就注意到了，但是我最近直到看它，我才发现还是挺震撼的，所以我想跟大家分享一下。因为启示录的第8章里面提到过，阴沉这个行星将要撞击地球，撞击的时间根据启示录是在7年大灾难的中间。那么 NASA 呢，美国国家宇航局也注意到了一颗行星哈，它命名这颗行星为 Apophis。Apophis 是古代以色列在埃及的时候，埃及的一位神，是一位像蛇一样一个很不可阻挡的一位混乱和黑暗之神。那么主把他们从这个 Apophis 这个神的这个权下把他们拯救出来。那这个 NASA 它命名 Apophis 也是有它属灵的意味的。那如果是这个 Apophis 跟阴沉是同一颗行星的话，那我们就有理由怀疑2029年往前4月往前推 3.5 年，那就来到了2025年的10月左右。所以我们有理由来保持警醒。这个 NASA 关于 Apophis 这颗小行星的数据是这样的，它有1200英尺宽，相当于4个足球场这么大。它以每小时28000英里的速度奔向地球，它的重量为2000万公吨。以此速度，它袭击地球的力量相当于2战末期65000颗广岛长期原子弹的这个威力。在2004年12月 NASA 认为在2029年有2.7% 的可能性它会撞击到地球，这也是 NASA 首次将一个小行星评为都灵撞击危险等级2级，后来又把它提升到了4级的危险等级，也是史上危险级达到最高级别的行星。这一消息一经发表，引起了全球媒体的大关注，因为产生了一些恐慌，所以 NASA 后来又把它圆润了一些，就是虽然这个行星仍然可能袭击地球，但是呢，它更大的可能性是接近地球而已。
So approximately 1 year ago now, went to bed, same scenario, 2 a.m. in the morning, and all of a sudden, I woke up into this panoramic, almost like a film that's playing out in front of me, and I'm in the middle of it. And what I first thought I was looking at was a giant fiery dragon, deep up in space, moving, undulating like a serpent, racing towards the earth. Then suddenly my point of view changed, and now I was up above the object, and I could see that it was not a fiery dragon, but rather it was a giant space rock, an asteroid. And the way it was turning as it was moving through the space and the light of the sun was glistening off of the elements of the stone. It only gave it the appearance that it was moving back and forth. Now, all of a sudden, I'm back on Earth again. And now I am surrounded by literally tens of thousands of people, and we are on a mountain. And we are running for our lives. And people everywhere are screaming and begging God to deliver them from what is coming. And I turn and I look over my shoulder, and I can see this fiery mountain, basically, this giant rock entering into the atmosphere, burning as it comes through the atmosphere, breaking apart as it comes through the atmosphere. A huge part of it strikes the ocean, a huge part of it strikes the earth, and all of a sudden, the earth is shaking so violently that none of us can stand up. We're all knocked off of our feet. It was the most horrific thing. I can hear this terrible sound as if the earth is literally cracking, like the mantle of the earth is breaking apart. And now I'm looking back over my shoulder again, and this giant wall of water, just an enormous tsunami, hundreds of feet tall, coming up over the top of this mountain. And again, everybody's trying to run. Then these what felt like large hands come down underneath my arms and lift me up into space, and now I'm looking down upon the earth. And here's an important part about this entire thing. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what would happen if an asteroid of that size were to impact the earth. But what I saw, I later found to be exactly how scientists describe what would transpire. With the waters boiling beneath this giant burning rock, the aerosol coming up off of that, entering into the upper atmosphere, setting in motion hurricane activity, the second part hitting the earth, causing a volcano to begin erupting.
So what you saw is what would actually happen, but you didn't have the knowledge of what would actually happen from a scientific viewpoint, but you still saw it.
Yeah. And to use street lingo, it freaked me out.
Well,
when I started doing the research, it really freaked me out.
But I'll tell you the thing that strikes me even stronger. You heard a name.
Yeah.
What was the name?
So as this is playing out, I'm terrified. All of a sudden I wake up and said, I almost fell out of bed on my face. I mean, I had cold chills all over me. I'd never seen anything this vivid or terrifying. I start writing it down, but then all of a sudden it was as if a voice. I don't know if this was just in my head or if it was an audible sound in the room, but it was as if a voice spoke and it said one word, Apophis.
后来 Tom Hord 在与他的宇航员科学家朋友在讨论启示录的时候呢，他们认为启示录第8章的前四位天使吹号讲述的是一个事件，就是行星撞击地球的事件。因为行星撞击地球它首先进入大气层的时候是会带来很大量的热量，这些热量会使树木，就像第一个天使吹号，地的1/3，树的1/3被烧，青草被烧，因为巨大的热量。那第二个天使吹号，就是说，这个巨大的行星在接近地球的时候，一定会撞击到地球周围的一些人造卫星啊，一些其他的碎片，会产生碎片，还有行星分裂，就是应该是爆裂的产生的一些碎片。那么第二位天使吹号也是这样说的。有仿佛火烧着的大山，大山就像岩石嘛，小行星扔在海中，海的1/3变成雪，活物死的1/3等等。第三位天使吹号就是这个鹰尘这颗行星，落到的是陆地的江河和众水的泉源上。那么这时候呢，因水变苦，就死了许多人，因为人类的饮用的水源是来自陆地的淡水，所以如果陆地的淡水遭到了腐蚀和污染，那么就会对人的生命产生影响。第四位天使吹号呢，就是他们认为这个行星撞击到地球一定会产生一些辐射般的一些粉尘啊、碎片呀、一些这个残骸呀，那么这些升到天空，会像这个第四位天使吹号所说的，日头的1/3，月亮就是发光体的1/3，没有光，光线受到了遮蔽，白昼的1/3没有光，黑夜也是这样。所以他们认为启示录第8章里面这4个天使吹号是说的同一个事件。
This question, how the Jewish feasts are connected to the arrival of Apophis. Well, I happen to be doing programs last year in the old studio with Derek Gilbert. And while we were talking about Apophis and the wormwood prophecy, I made the case that if Apophis is the fulfillment of the wormwood prophecy, Revelation chapter 8, that would happen in the middle of the Great Tribulation period. And then I made this point. I said, so if you are, and most evangelical Christians, whether they know it or not, are dispensationalists who believe in a 7-year tribulation period, if that's what you believe, and if Apophis is wormwood, then with that being in the middle of the tribulation period, you would count backward 3.5 years to arrive at the beginning of what is called the 7-year Great Tribulation period. Well, while I was saying that, Derek and Sharon, who were interviewing me, Derek is sitting across and he's got his iPad or whatever it is he's using, his MacBook, and he had opened a Jewish calendar, a Hebrew calendar, on his device. And he went 3.5 years earlier, and he literally turned pale because 3.5 years earlier, before the impact of Apophis, to the day is the middle of the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, we probably don't have enough time for me to explain all the ways in which end times prophecy experts connect the Feast of Tabernacles and the Feast of Trumpets with the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period and the second coming of Jesus Christ. But just suffice to say this, it not only falls into the middle of the Feast of Tabernacles, but literally on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles in 2025. So just 5 years from now. Why is that important? Because the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles is when the ancient Hebrews, get this, sacrificed 7 bulls in commemoration of God delivering them from all of the gods of the nations, but in particular, delivering them from the gods of Egypt, and in particular, delivering them from Apophis, the ancient Egyptian god of chaos. Literally, that day in antiquity is 3.5 years to the day from when Apophis is going to strike the earth, is when the Hebrews will be celebrating how God in antiquity delivered them from Apophis. So is God going to deliver his own people 3.5 years earlier? 10 days before that is the Feast of Trumpets, which is also connected to the second coming of Christ. Why? Because the Apostle Paul drew a parallel to the Feast of Trumpets when he said, at the last trump, so during the Feast of Trumpets, the shofar is sounded 100 times. Paul says, at the last trump, the dead in Christ shall rise. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. But get this, in 2025, 120 days before that is the Feast of Pentecost. And in biblical numerology, the number 120 is the number of the end of mankind. God said in Genesis, my spirit will not always strive with man, for his years will be 120. And that set the pattern for that to be the representation of the end of mankind. Of course, Moses was also a parody of that, in that he died at 120 years of age. So all of these highly important Jewish feasts that are connected to the second coming of Christ are absolutely connected 3.5 years earlier to from the impact of Apophis, which I believe is the fulfillment of the wormwood prophecy of Revelation chapter 8. One more final thing, because we totally are not going to have time to talk about this. The ancient Essenes, the inhabitants of Qumran. Lots of people, they know the Essenes from the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered there in the 1940s. What they don't know, and by the way, this has only been unearthed in the last 50 years, archaeologists have also recovered prophecies that the Essenes made, and even material that illustrates who the Essenes were. 150 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, the Essenes began prophesying about the first advent of the coming of the Messiah. They said that he would come at a time when a king named Herod would be a king and he would turn evil. They said he would die in the year 32 AD, which is what scholars believe exactly happened. They said he will die not only for Jewish people, but he will be sacrificed for the Gentiles as well, and give birth to an age of grace that would extend for a period of 2,000 years. The list literally goes on and on. We're going to produce a documentary film in 2021 about all of this. But why am I bringing this all up now? Because they also prophesied this, that mankind, now this was over 2,000 years ago, these highly accurate prophets called the Essenes who lived in Qumran, they predicted that mankind will enter its final age. Guess when? In the year 2025.
众所周知， 以色列的传统节期是有预言性的，是对未来要发生的事情的重要参考。这一点是比较可信的。比如说主耶稣在逾越节被钉十字架，在除酵节被埋葬，在初熟节复活，又在50天以后的五旬节降下圣灵。上帝在吩咐以色列人守这些节期的时候呢，他称这些节期为圣会 The Holy Convocations， 意思是彩排。那我们可以理解彩排的意思，从头到尾要走一遍这个文艺汇演。那么以色列节期的前4个春季的节期都已经彩排过了，剩下呢还有秋季的三个节期，分别是犹太新年吹角节、赎罪日还有住棚节。那么这几个节日会不会也被彩排和满足呢？让我们准备好自己的油，保持警醒，拭目以待。